Today's video is about the addition, the special addition we are getting in 11.1, where for the first time in a while we have something extra in a patch, because usually, as you know by now, it's been quite a few expansions where we are used to get the new patch, which is going to include a new raid, usually inside a new zone. That new zone usually also brings a new reputation, so you can get more ranks with the reputation, get more rewards until you either hit Exalted back then when reputations were still a thing, and then later on with the introduction of Renown, you could get high level Renown with a new faction. Now, what changes in 11.1 is that you still have your generic new Renown addition in 11.1, the Cartels of the Undermine, which progresses as you would expect with similar other Renown rewards you know about from current existing Renown levels, basically meaning not really that much, not really anything that good. You will get maybe a mount, a pet, a toy. At the very end you will get a title, right? These kind of rewards are pretty standard for normal factions. However, on top of this Renown faction, which is for the open world rep of the Undermine zone, there will be a new one. There will be an extra one inside of the raid, which is the Galaggio Loyalty Rewards Club. And this one is supposedly specifically made to improve the quality of life of raiders, but also to some degree the quality of life of everyone who wants to hang around this hotel. Because, for example, this faction you will get, of course, to Renown 1 as soon as you enter the raid and get to discover the faction, and then it will progress very simply, 1 Renown level per week. There is no cheating, there is no degenerate strategy involved. You literally get reputation from bosses and you're locked to get at best 1 Renown level per week. So that's basically it. You will get to Renown 2 at the release of the raid, and then second week you will get to Renown 3, third week you will get to Renown 4, etc, etc. That's how you will progress this Renown faction. There's not gonna be any kind of secret strategy discovered where players have to grind for 12 hours a day to suddenly get to Renown 20 in just a couple of days. Now, the early QOLs are pretty simple. As soon as you get to encounter the faction, you get all of the profession tables, vendors and crafting order specialists all available inside of this hotel. You can see them right over here. All of the profession tables will be available for you right inside the actual zone, as well as the crafting order NPC as well. Renown 2, which is also what you will be able to earn on the very first week of the raid, allows you to be able to try the slot machine Busted Rune Dispenser that has a chance of giving you an Augment Rune. Presumably 1 per day. You can get, presumably, this roll to get your Augment Rune. We don't quite know how likely this is, simply because this right now doesn't work. So expect a dramatic drop in the cost of Augment Runes in the auction house anyways, because now everyone once a day has a chance to get 1 to begin with from that dispenser over there. It might actually also be even better for alts, players with like 5 or 6 alts being able to roll this 5 or 6 times a day would be pretty good, as well as minor QOL inside of the raid, consuming food 100% faster. So now it takes you 5 seconds to get well fed instead of 10. On week 2, you get the access to the transmogrifying and item upgrades vendors, which are, I believe, all the way down here. That's the transmog, that is the item upgrades that are over here, and also later on the crest exchange vendor as well. That's what you get from Renown 3. Renown 4, which is 3 weeks in, is your first damage and healing buff of the raid, which will, carry over in this tier as well. Loyal customer rank 1, you get 3% more damage and healing. The other one, the Token of Appreciation, is an interesting one, because you get access to the Galaggio rewards card, which returns you to the Incontinental Hotel. However, the special thing is that this only works when inside of the raid itself. So basically, it's a Hearthstone. It's an extra 30 minutes cooldown Hearthstone that you can only use when you're inside of the raid and you want to get teleported back to the entrance. The logic, according to Blizzard, is that now, well, this entire hub gives you everything you might want eventually. All of the profession tables, the crafting orders, the item upgrades, the auction house. So obviously, usually, if you wanted to teleport away from the raid, it was for what? Because you needed to buy something from the auction house, because you wanted to upgrade the item you just looted, Perhaps you just killed enough bosses to get your quests and you wanted to buy the quest to craft something. Well, now all of this is inside this raid, so you will get this extra Artstone to go back inside, but at the very entrance of the raid itself. Week 5 is something interesting. Fixer Upper gain clearance to use various Fixer Upper stations within the raid, which allows you to repair your items, but also to remove the sated debuffs, so the Bloodlust debuff. This is possibly, valuable if any of these bosses are going to be particularly annoying to reset, or might require even a full wipe to reset. You might very well just go to one of these Fixer Uppers and get the Bloodlust debuff reset this way, instead of trying to reset the boss itself. Renown 6, we are now 5 weeks into the raid. Time is money now starts to give you 10% movement speed buff inside of the raid. And then Wake Up Merc is the Carter Jumble cables to dust yourself off outside of combat, resurrecting you with 10% HP. So this is the self-combat rest that players will have access to. Now, Blizzard is pointing out that this is a work in progress, and the plan is to give this effect a 30-minute to 1 hour as a range of cooldown, which is aimed at being an emergency wipe recovery tool. So you imagine your healer as a soulstone, he dies in combat, he gets resurrected in combat, then you still wipe. The soulstone is lost, nobody can get rest, and you have to corpse run, for example. This one would help you save that time by simply having one resurrected this way. Also, this seems to be a personal buff, not something that is shared in the raid. So you would only require a single healer at a time to make use of this, right? Because then one healer will use this tool to then use mass rest. And then the next wipe, if again you mess up and you have no soulstone and no combat rest, then you can just have another healer use this. And you can just cycle your healers, and even if all of the healers somehow you messed up 5 times or 4 times in a row, all of the healers already use this, you can just rest a single DPS that can then rest a healer and then must rest again. So this should almost certainly get rid of any possible corpse runs and just time losses within the raid by almost always basically having someone ready to resurrect after a wipe. The rank 7 is the 6 weeks into the raid, so we got the first one on week 3, so 3 weeks later you get the 6% damage and healing buff. Now it's interesting, if you have noticed, this is happening now every 3 weeks instead of every 2. That is what we had before. Before we were increasing by 2.25% more damage and healing every 2 weeks. Now we are increasing by 3% every 3 weeks. That's the change in this new raid apparently. Now Renown 8 or week 7 is pretty interesting because this Renown is going to allow you, after defeating the first boss, to go to an NPC that will fly you on her little rocket right before the last 2 bosses. So this is basically the raid skip, which for years now has been relegated to a quest, where you get to defeat the last boss or the second to last boss for 4 weeks, and then finally you earn the skip. This is now happening to everyone. Everyone will unlock this on week 7, basically, when you get to Renown 8. Now, the relevant things about this is that number 1, it's not gated by bosses, which means you could be killing boss 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 every week to get to this Renown and still get the tool to be able to skip to the last 2 bosses. This means that even guilds, for example, even mythic guilds who are at some point on the 4th or 5th boss would be able to just skip one to go to the last 2 with this tool. There doesn't seem to be any mention about this one being limited by actually having progressed or actually having killed those bosses at least once before. So it seems to be a pretty global skip. Renown 9 is just some cosmetic reward. It's some pets, some cosmetic pets for you to learn. Renown 10, we actually went up a week now. First it was Renown 3 to get 3% more damage, then it was Renown 6, now it's not Renown 9, it's Renown 10 to get you the 9% damage and healing buff. Renown 11 is when your movement speed is upgraded to 20% outside of combat, and then cheap service, this is your transmog reward. And we're talking about the same thing that you can get pretty much already in the War Within from the Earth Encrusted Gems. It's just a token to exchange for a full, a full transmog set from this guy, right? Except now it's gonna be Goblin themed within the raid in the Undermine. Renown 12 is an interesting one because 11 weeks into the raid, the professionals will instead give you a special hot sauce, increasing the effectiveness of your consumable buffs inside of Liberation of Undermine. So this technically could also be seen as a damage or healing increase buff, because on top of your own flasks and food and even potions you're using, the hot sauce buff should actually also empower you, because it will increase the value of those buffs you have on yourself. We're on 13, again 3 weeks later, the buff goes up to 12% from 9. We're on 14, so now we are 13 weeks in, it's been over 3 months now. Step right up, rank 2 is now the guaranteed crystallized augment rune, at least one crystallized augment rune guaranteed from your RNG dispenser, with a chance of up to 3 for repeated uses. So again, this could be massive value if you have 5, 6 or 7 alts, because this is war bound. Obviously the warband reputation is for all your characters, so presumably you might have 10 characters and earn 10 different augment runes per day. There might be some caveats, to be honest, or some limitations to this level of exploitation, otherwise the augment runes will go down to like 60 gold on the auction house, which is not a bad thing actually. Renown 15, you get the second chip for your transmog appearance rewards, and also cashing out. The one arm bandit, which is the, I believe, 6th boss of the raid, now has a chance to drop additional counterfeit dealings chips for additional purchases of cosmetic rewards within the raid. So at least, you know, it's cool that the 6th boss now gives you something extra, you know. So there is one more, go away, you and you. There is one more reason to kill the 6th boss, right? Just in case you needed absolutely nothing, which is unlikely because this trinket will be best in slot for a lot of classes. But, you know, besides that, it's nice to give bosses some, you know, extra reason to be killing them. Then Renown 16, loyal customer tier 5, 15% more damage and healing. This will come on week 15, so it's about almost 4 months in. 4 months in is when you get your first dinar. The puzzling cartel chip is basically a dinar, allows you to trade for a powerful Liberation of Undermine item, which can be a trinket as usual, a weapon as usual, and a special item. So, you know, any item that is not a weapon or a trinket with a special effect, for example the cloak that gives you the extra move speed for a very short period of time, that would be an extra item. The special ring with the special effect, that would also be a special item purchasable with this new dinar. That will come on Renown 17, so week 16, 4 months into the raid. 18 gets you the professional tier 5. This is when the auction house gets unlocked within the hotel itself, as well as time is money tier 3, which is the 30% movement speed at Renown 18. At Renown 19, you finish out the loyal customer, just like we will finish out next week in this current patch, the 18% damage and healing buff. This will happen as well on Renown 19, which will be 18 weeks into the raid. So the timeline for the buff, even though it's a little bit wonkier, it starts at 3%, after 3 weeks it gets to 6, after 4 weeks it gets to 9, so it's a bit more off compared to how we have gotten the 2.25% damage and healing buff this tier every 2 weeks precisely, but it will end in the same number, 18% damage and healing. The other one at Renown 19 is the second dinar, your second token to pick whatever item you want. And much like, of course, in Dragonflight, this will have a very large upgrade track. It will not have the usual 6 out of 6 of most items. It will have 14, because it will start at normal track, because of course even players that do only normal raid, for example, or don't even raid at all, can take this dinar. So for everyone it will start at normal, and then of course if you have the crests, if you have done mythic raid content or mythic class content, or nowadays even delve content, to get your max level crests, you can get that item all the way up to track, you know, 14 out of 14 to be an equivalent of these mythic raid items. The last of the Renown levels, Renown 20, it's just cosmetic, you know, it's just final rewards like getting the high roller rank. It will upgrade your teleport to instead now giving you the ability to teleport to the raid whenever you want, from any zone you want, no longer just from the raid itself. And then the Furious Flarendo is a mount. So you get your title, your mount, and your free teleport once you reach Renown 20, which will be no earlier than week 19. So almost 5 months into the raid. Now, These are all of the rewards that will come from the raid, practically at zero effort. Blizzard has explained the leveling system of this Renown. Renown is fully warbound and difficulty agnostic. Difficulty agnostic means it does not matter if you're killing a normal boss, a heroic boss, or a mythic boss. Every tier requires 2,500 Renown, and within the raid itself, at any given time, 5,000 Renown will be available for you. With bosses 1 through 6 providing 450 rep per kill, the 7th boss providing 600, and the last boss providing 1,000, plus all of the trash lieutenants, the mini bosses in the trash, giving you also 100 each, totaling up 5,000. And you only need half of this to get to 1 Renown every week. So basically, you enter the raid even in just like normal difficulty, you kill the first 6 bosses in normal and you get your Renown. That's all you need to do every week to cap this Renown by week 19. Blizzard also mentions, of course, there will be a catch-up mechanism where if you are 1 week behind what would be the maximum, you're gonna be able to get up to more levels of Renown in 1 week rather than being capped at 1 per week, of course. And also, despite being tied to the raid, since sometimes this happens when things like raiding is involved, this is planned to be sort of retroactive, so in future expansions it will be just as fast to level this up. You will not be gated or limited to earn any of these rewards in this particular season or even this particular expansion. You will just be able to drop in even 2 expansions from now and still go through all of this Renown with the accelerated, catch-up thing where you get way more Renown levels per week and you will not be limited by the 1 per week cap that you will have next season. Now, the one point of contention about this entire this reward track is we're not judging the fact that the QOLs are good, the fact that you can get some pretty nice stuff in here from, as mentioned, all of the professions being in here, your item upgrades, the crest exchange vendor, even eventually the free Augment Runes every day, right? That's all cool. However, you kind of wonder about a few things in here, like for example the fact that after a while you'll get access to your auction house, right? So you're like, oh, finally we don't have to go back to the capital city, here is your auctioneer, great. Now the thing is though that while this might be great, this becomes available on week 17. So we're talking about having an auctioneer inside the raid finally after 4 months. After 4 months of the raid you will actually get your auction house. That will be the equivalent of getting right now in Nerobar Palace the auction house from when the raid released early September to basically now. It's as if now we got an auction house in Nerobar Palace. I mean, okay, sure, fine, I guess, but that's, about 3 months too late for being actually useful for many guilds progressing in Nerobar Palace itself. The same could be said about many of the other QOL effects, like being able, for example, to get your 30% movement speed 17 weeks into the raid. Or even, but this one is slightly more understandable, the dinars themselves, the priceless payout happening 16 weeks, so 4 months in, and then 19 weeks in, so 4.5 months in you get your 2 tokens for your 2 best in slot items as a sort of catch up or bad luck protection system if you have never gotten your best in slot items, or maybe items that are very contested throughout the season. Like for example, just to name one, if we were to go back right now in Nerobar Palace, some players might be going for something like this ring as their reward from their token, right? Or some other contested items, like for example Spymaster's Web, or maybe some rare drops which weren't that much contested but for some reason never even dropped, like the Void Reaper's contract or even the Void Reaper's Warp Blade from Nexus Princess, right? So some players will be annoyed because they're like, but I'm gonna be done with my progression by then. It's 4.5 months in. I'm already done like 1.5 months in. Well, clearly most of the rewards won't really be that much relevant for the very high level guilds. Practically Hall of Fame guilds, right? Hall of Fame guilds will be done within the first 10 or so weeks, most of them anyways. So many of the rewards, many of the juicier rewards that will happen past this level of renown, so the gear renown, the increased amount of Augment Runes you can get, as well as of course the dinars being awarded won't really be relevant for them, but for the rest of the player base. And also many of these things can still be benefited from non-raiders. You know, the Augment Runes, even non-raiders can use them. The 2 tokens for your best in slot items, even non-raiders can use them. And also on top of this, we can still say that technically all of this is free. We already have our own Renown faction this season. This is the generic Renown faction. So this is practically everything that we get on top as a secondary extra Renown faction. So it's just extra stuff you can get this season as well. So I still think it's overall a very positive addition, as Blizzard is trying once again to make raiding more enticing, or maybe raiding more enjoyable, to give you also a clear progress track every week, at least for the first 20 weeks, which is a pretty long time for you to go at least every week into the raid. And increase the participation within the raid, because now you also have clear rewards in the raid beyond just loot, which might dry up very quickly, especially if you're not a mythic raider and you're just doing normal or heroic. It's very likely that you might end up out of interesting rewards within the raid very early. This Renown track will allow you to extend the importance of the raid for longer, whether it is because you want more transmog rewards, or because you want the mount, or you want the title, or even because you want more Augment Runes for your mythic plus keys, or even because you want the tokens, the Dinar tokens, to get your best in slots eventually. So this was the recap, the rerun of what's going to be available in this new faction coming in 11.1. The first time we get a double rep, a double Renown faction in a season. One for the generic open world play and rewards, and one specifically for the raid. So for today, on this Monday, the beginning of a new week, we can now leave each other once more. We are starting as usual the goodbyes by thanking everyone for having watched the video, together with of course everyone who has been supporting completely for free by liking and commenting down below, as well as subscribing to the channel itself. Now, with these things out of the way, thank you guys again for watching. See you guys tomorrow, and in the meantime, you know, I am fine with all of the rewards except the auction house. Come on man, 4 months. People have mounts with auction house now, and you have to wait 4 months for an auction house in here.